Good morning. Hope that your Wednesday is off to a good start. Mine is so far. And I'm glad that you're going to spend a few minutes of a Wednesday morning with me. I was thinking about what I might want to talk about today. And just in thinking about, like next week in my little corner of the kingdom, and we started a Bible study on the very basics. What is the Bible? What's in it? What sort of literature there is? How did we get the Bible? And then any discussion like that ultimately leads to the veritable alphabet soup of Bible translations. And I thought that I realized that there were a couple of translations that I have on the shelf here that I haven't mentioned yet. Several years ago, I did a long series of these on the, like I said, the alphabet soup of Bible translations: NIV, NRSV, ESV, NASB, NLT, and all the rest. But there are a couple that I didn't talk about. One I didn't even have at that point, and the other I had but didn't even think about referring to it. So this week and next week, that's what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to be talking about two additional translations of the Bible. In particular, these are Old Testament translations. In particular, these can be Old Testament translations. For today, what is referred to as the Tanakh, and I'll explain what that term means. And then next week, Robert Alter's Hebrew Bible. And if you hear the term Hebrew Bible, it's simply another way of saying the Old Testament. The two are essentially the same. So for today, the Tanakh. So what in the world is Tanakh? What is a Tanakh? The term Tanakh is, it's an acronym. It is simply an acronym for the three main groupings of books in the Hebrew canon, our Old Testament. Our Jewish cousins, they arranged the books of their canon, our Old Testament, differently. They arranged them differently. The Torah, the law, the first 5 books, and then the prophets, and they essentially are the same as our prophets, except that they do include in the prophets things like Kings and Samuel, and then a last grouping called the writings. The Torah, there's your T. The Hebrew term for prophets is Nevi'im, prophets plural, and the writings, Ketuvim, it's a T-N-K, Tanakh in other words. So for today, I want to refer to the Jewish Publication Society Hebrew English Tanakh. Just some mechanics of it. It is, I'll show you the picture here. It is done by the Jewish Publication Society, so it is obviously written for a Jewish audience. But there's no reason that we as Christians can't read it, because it's the same books. Isaiah is Isaiah is Isaiah. The Psalms are the Psalms are the Psalms. But the big thing, if you pick up the Tanakh, is because it is written for a Jewish audience, it is put together differently. it is put together totally differently. Hebrew goes from right to left. On the page, you read from right to left. Books are bound differently. So this is the front of the book, not this. So when you open up this, you open it as we call it, you open it backwards, where this is the front. Like I said, their ordering of the books is different. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy are there just like in ours, but after that it is arranged differently. When you have the prophets after that, and even within the prophets, they are arranged differently. There's the former prophets and the latter prophets, and the 12 minor prophets are grouped together, simply called the 12. And then you have the writings, and by writings that would be Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes. Chronicles is included in the writings, and is at the very end of the canon. And curiously, the book of Daniel is included in the writings rather than amongst the prophets, as in our arrangement of the Old Testament. One thing I will show you, neat thing about this, hopefully you can see this. You see Hebrew and English in parallel columns, which is very helpful. If you know a little bit of Hebrew, you can you can see the English translation here, the Hebrew there, and you can sort of see. So it's almost like an interlinear in that regard. So for the translation itself, it's based on the oldest manuscript collections of the Old Testament. It doesn't really make use of the Dead Sea Scrolls at all, and in most cases that really doesn't matter. In terms of the translation philosophy, it's I guess maybe a good analogy in terms of a translation philosophy would be it's maybe equivalent to the NIV. Not that it translates things the same way, but the philosophy behind the translation is probably similar to that. It's not super literal on this end, nor is it really just a paraphrase on this end. It's sort of in the middle. The technical term for that is dynamic equivalence, and if you don't know what that means, show up to the Bible studies next week and several weeks after that. It's maybe sort of thought for thought. Now, when we as Christians read through this, there will be some things that we might notice. There's some subtle differences, slight things, because remember, this is a Jewish translation, and so sometimes they will translate things slightly differently. There might be a few times that they translate the Hebrew word ruach as breath or wind instead of as spirit, and there are some times where the term spirit is used in a Christian translation and is capitalized, thinking it is a reference to the Holy Spirit, and that S wouldn't be capitalized in this translation. In general, they're not going to, I think the best way to put this, a Christian translation is going to might translate portions of the Old Testament, particularly like messianic prophecies. They might translate it to really play up the prophetic meaning of the text. And this is going to go the other direction. So, for instance, Isaiah 7:14, behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son. And there have been veritable holy wars fought over how to translate that. Behold, the virgin shall conceive, or behold, the young woman will conceive. And this obviously will go hedge towards, and will render that as, behold, the young woman will conceive. So what I want to do now is just read several passages so to give you a flavor of this. And remember, you have to open it from the back, as we would call it. So Genesis 1 and 2. When God began to create heaven and earth, the earth being unformed and void, with darkness over the surface of the deep, and wind from God sweeping over the water, God said, let there be light, and there was light. God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness, and so forth and so on. And then Isaiah 11. This is also a really well-known portion of the Old Testament. Some normally regarded as messianic. But a shoot shall grow out of the stump of Jesse, a twig shall sprout from his stalk. The Spirit of the Lord shall recite a spirit of counsel and valor, a spirit of devotion and reverence for the Lord. He shall sense the truth by his reverence for the Lord. He shall not judge by what his eyes behold, nor decide by what his ears perceive. Thus he will judge the poor with equity, and decide with justice for the lowly of the land. And he shall strike down a hand with the rod of his mouth, and slay the wicked with the breath of his lips. And justice shall be the girdle of his loins, and faithfulness the girdle of his waist. The wolf shall dwell with the lamb, the leopard lie down with the kid, the calf, the beast of prey, and the fatling together, with a little boy to herd them. The cow and the bear shall graze, their young shall lie down together, and the lion, like the ox, shall eat straw. A babe shall play over a viper's hole, and an infant pass his hand over the adder's den. In all my sacred mount, nothing evil or vile shall be done. For the land shall be filled with devotion to the Lord as the waters cover the sea. So, how does this render a couple of well-known psalms? Psalm 23. We all know Psalm 23, or many of us know Psalm 23. By rote, by heart, we know it. In King James English, here's how the Tanakh renders it. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me to water in places of repose. He renews my life. He guides me in right paths, as befits his name. Though I walk through a valley of deepest darkness, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You spread a table for me in full view of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My drink is abundant. Only goodness and steadfast love shall pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord for many long years. And then another one that many of us might have learned when we were very young, Psalm 100. Raise a shout for the Lord, all the earth. Worship the Lord in gladness. Come into his presence with shouts of joy. Acknowledge that the Lord is God. He made us, and we are his people in the flock of his herds. Enter his gates with praise, doors for all generations. So that is the Tanakh. If you happen to see one secondhand, pick it up. It may be a bit pricey. I think it would probably run $50 or $60 to get one of these brand new, but it is really good. In fact, I use it once in a while. If I'm preaching from the Old Testament text, every so often I will read from this, simply because it gives a fresh take on it, a fresh look at the passage. But that is the Tanakh, and it is, if you want to pick one up, it is well worth it. Just remember that you read from right to left, and you open the book, as we would call it, you open it to the back. With that, I hope you have a great rest of your Wednesday, and again, no matter what Bible you read it. Have a great rest of your day.